you're going to get a bigger reward when it's harder to accomplish something. So something like a rezone that's no fees, 2 or 3 months, it's going to have value to it, but it's not going to have the same value bump as you would maybe something that's a little bit harder. Bang for the buck wise, rezoning is where you're going to make the biggest profits because again, you're changing what's allowed in terms of how the property is being used.
Hey, welcome back everyone to another episode of Eat, Sleep, and Invest. I'm your host, Brian Driscoll, and I'm here with Mike Marshall. What's going on, man?
Hey, how you doing, Brian?
Hey, pretty good. Living a dream, right?
That's right. Every day. Love it.
Yeah, so everyone, we're going to be talking about land and that side of investing today. Hey, Mike, why don't you give everybody a little bit of background on like what you do?
Sure, absolutely. You know, my first experience in real estate was like 12 years old, working on my dad's properties, you know, helping him re-roof properties, things like that, you know. And so that was my first like, you know, entryway into the world of real estate, but it never left me, you know. And so I went to college, kind of came out of that and went into an allied profession that was just not really totally real estate related, but somewhat real estate related. But I ended up working my way through the jurisdiction I was working in the planning and zoning department. And so I worked in planning and zoning for about 15 years in different jurisdictions, both in California and Texas. During that time, I worked on everything from like custom homes to 1,200 lot residential subdivisions, commercial buildings, a TV and movie studio campus along the way, all sorts of different stuff. But it was all within this space of entitlements. And so entitlements being that government approval process that you'll see like at public hearings where people are out there chanting people down and getting after developers and things like that. That was like the world that I lived in for those 15 years. But during that time, I really realized that there was this information gap. There was all these opportunities out there that I saw being more of an investor mindset that a lot of investors locally didn't see and weren't aware of. And so I saw there being an opportunity to kind of get out there in my community and help bridge that gap. And so I started a consulting business, started doing that on the side, eventually branched out and was doing our own deals. And then now really what we do is we're focused on helping real estate professionals, whether it's agents, brokers, investors, really helping them uncover these hidden value add opportunities that are out there.
So you're saying entitlement. Like I know there's one up the street from us. It was a mini golf like business. And they want to make it a gas station.
Yeah.
So everyone's like an uproar and they're trying to get the zoning changed to be allowed to do that. Is that what you're saying entitlement is?
Yeah, that's the world that I lived in, you know. So there's different types of things that fall under that umbrella of entitlements, rezoning being one of them, subdivisions, changes of use. So there's a variety of different types of things that fall underneath that entitlement umbrella. But yeah, that is certainly one of them.
What makes you like doing this part of it?
Yeah, you know, I think I went into it with the intention of like, hey, I want to do like what I guess I'd call traditional real estate investing, but I needed a W-2 income at the time, you know, and so I was going to get as closely aligned as I possibly could. And so I did that going into the planning and zoning department because I was working in a different department in that city. And it was a way for me to stay with my employer, but still be more closely aligned with real estate. And so that's really what drove me into it. And I never thought I was going to stay in it for a long time, but I ultimately realized that it was a unique niche that was highly valuable to certain, you know, types of developers and things like that. And so I just kept running with it and ended up really being able to make a business out of it.
I can see that being really valuable because like even me with my properties, anytime I need to deal with the government or the borough on anything, it's a pain in the butt.
Yeah, exactly.
So just being familiar, like I don't even know like some of the terms, things like that when you're dealing with them. So you got to deal with whoever you're dealing with, the inspector, whatever. In your case, at least you got some guidance on, okay, here's how to negotiate and do things with them.
Yeah, exactly. I mean, that's one of the things that we just recently started with our new website was we have this service that basically, you know, addresses that issue where 99% of investors really don't know what questions to ask. And then even when they do get in touch with the jurisdiction, it's a hard time getting somebody to give them a straight answer or even get on the phone at all. And so we're just able to utilize, you know, our experience. You know, when I say we have a team of other land use planners that we've worked with for years. We just leverage that experience really into being able to get those answers as quickly as possible for investors. So that way they don't have to deal with that kind of problem.
So let's talk about forced appreciation. I know you talk about that a lot.
Yeah.
What are you talking about forced appreciation and how can people do it?
Sure. So there's two types of appreciation. There's the one that we all love, which is really market-wide appreciation, right? Where we don't really do anything. It's just the market appreciates if we happen to be in the market at the right time in the right place. So that's market-wide appreciation. The other side is really forced appreciation, where we're taking proactive steps to force the appreciation of the property's value regardless of what's really going on in the market. And so the primary difference is that proactive step, that proactive portion of it. And so when I'm saying proactive, I'm thinking like, okay, well, we're going to go in and we're going to do any variety of things. But in terms of what I do, it's really more like the subdivisions or adding an accessory dwelling unit to a residential property. Or maybe if it's an oversized lot with a single family house, we're going to subdivide that, sell off one portion of the property that has a house on it, and then sell off the lot to a builder that's going to build on it. Something like that. But forced appreciation can be done in more of like a operational sense on multifamily property where you're doing anything to decrease your expenses or increase your revenue. That is certainly forced appreciation as well. But what we really specialize in is really finding those opportunities that are existing within the development code of the jurisdiction. So again, it's things like subdivisions and rezoning and like changes of use. Everything that we do is a way to change the use of the property, which really ultimately does really increase its value, right? Because the value of the property is always tied to how it's being used.
So give a couple examples. Like one I'm thinking on the top of my head is, say I could find a large corner lot and the lots are, we'll say, horizontal. Mm-hmm. And when they say there's 2 horizontal lots, if we split it and rezone it, we can make 3 vertical lots, things like that. And what are the common examples that most investors out there come across that you see that they should have on the top of their head when they're looking at properties?
Right. So I think like the kind of like the lowest hanging fruit in a sense in terms of the ease of the process is really looking at subdivision opportunities. And those are going to exist in single family properties, too. So if you have something that's, oversized like that, you can certainly look in it and say, okay, there's 3 things I really need to look at. I need to look at really what is the minimum lot size requirement. So if I'm in a zone that has, minimum lot size of 5,000 square feet and I have a 15,000 square foot lot, then I have the potential of maybe cutting that one lot into 3. Do I have, the minimum lot frontage requirement? That's the second thing. And so maybe there's a 50-foot wide minimum lot frontage requirement. So how can I configure the lots to where I still have 5,000 square feet on each lot, but also have that 50 square feet or 50 linear feet of frontage, to be able to qualify for a subdivision? And then the third thing that we look at is what's called a density requirement. And that's not always required in every jurisdiction, but density is really the number of dwelling units per acre. And you have to really accomplish all 3 of those to be able to get a subdivision approved typically. But anytime you're looking at a single family home that has an extra large lot on it, you really got to look at it from the terms of, can I subdivide it? Can I do an accessory dwelling unit on it? These are some of like the more simple things that you could do in terms of the world of entitlements. But truthfully, it's those things that a lot of people miss.
I could see that too. Now, every county or probably every borough is going to have different requirements, right?
Yeah, that's true. That's one of the hard parts about it is that every city, every borough, every county is always going to have their own regulations. But the good news is that over time, you start to understand that the concepts are still the same. And so, you may have 2 different jurisdictions that have an R1 zoning and they're called the same, but reality is the requirements in those zones are going to be different. And the reality is, everyone's going to be different, but there are such consistencies in terms of the themes and the concepts that over time, you get to understand that and you'll get to know what questions to ask and everything like that. And then most oftentimes is, even though you can do this stuff remotely, most people will start, really working in a handful of jurisdictions and they'll get that familiarity over time.
Gotcha. And then you say asking the right questions. Like, what are some of these questions people need to be asking?
Yeah, I mean, the biggest things are going to be like, okay, well, what's really, when you call up the planning office, it's like, well, what can I do with this property? And really it's, what can be placed on the property today? So what does the current zoning allow for? Can I subdivide the property? Can I do some sort of site plan approval for like, a multifamily building or a duplex or something along those lines? Can I add an ADU? And if those answers that you're getting are not like favorable, like you don't think that's the best use of the property, then you can start talking about the idea of rezoning the property. And once you rezone the property, then it's a question of what zone am I rezoning to be able to accomplish the development goal that I have. So I may be in an R1 zone that allows for a single family home, and all I want to do is get a duplex on there. So to do that, I just need to go from R1 to R2, for example. That's an easy shift, and that might be something that can be accomplished depending on a variety of scenarios and circumstances in that jurisdiction.
Now, I know I've dealt with the borough where I invest, and they're not the easiest. And everything is slow, like really slow.
Yeah.
So what are you seeing on like timeframes on getting things done and like working with different government entities, like different boroughs, things like that?
Sure. I'd say that it's certainly different, and there's a big variety and a big disparity between 2, because honestly, I've seen areas where you can get a rezoning done and there's no fees at all. And it takes like 2 or 3 months. And that's very rural areas. And then I've seen places in California where it's going to take you 18 months and it's going to cost you $40,000 in just application fees. And so there's everything in between that. And so it is very important to understand that picking a jurisdiction is important in a way, but also just to understand that, those fees are also going to be somewhat commensurate with the profit that's associated to it. So in general, just conceptually, you're going to get a bigger reward when it's harder to accomplish something. So something like like a rezone that's no fees, 2 or 3 months, it's going to have value to it, but it's not going to have the same value bump as you would maybe something that's a little bit harder. And I will say that bang for the buck wise, rezoning is where you're going to make the biggest profits because, again, you're changing what's allowed in terms of how the property is being used.
So when investors are looking at things, that makes me think it's like, if I'm buying a property, it's like 100 to 200 grand. It's probably not worth, like you're going to rezone, maybe make like 20, 30 grand, but it's going to hold up your flip or anything like that. What are the ideal properties? Because you don't want to be waiting 18 months to make $40,000.
Right.
You would for 400,000.
Yeah, exactly. So I can just give you examples, like one that we're working on right now in Florida is 3 different parcels that we're assembling together into one. And so assembling just being kind of like the reverse of a subdivision, we're just bringing 3 parcels into one. And those are all zoned agricultural right now, but we're rezoning them to allow for multifamily. And what we'll end up doing in those scenarios is we'll get an appraisal for the properties in its as-is condition as it's currently zoned. And then we'll also get like an estimate in terms of what the appraisal would be under the hypothetical scenario that it gets rezoned to something else. So we do that early in the process so that way we understand what that delta is, what the change is, what the value add number actually looks like. So in this situation, all those parcels, there's 3 parcels, 2 of them had homes on them. Total valuation of all those parcels as is was about 1.2 million. And then you go in and you rezone it. And just by rezoning it alone, the value that came back was about 2.3 million. And so that's not always the case. That's a big, huge gap, and it sounds really like it's a lot of money, and it really is. It's not always that big, but they are on a percentage basis really, really significant when you can go through a rezoning process. Now, not every entitlement is like that, but that's why I said rezoning is your biggest bang for the buck.
Now that's 2.3 before building too, right? Yeah,
absolutely. So you're doing that very early in the process. When you get a property rezoned, you're setting it up for the next guy in line, the developer. So that's a lot of what we do is we're just going in, getting the entitlements in place, and then selling the property to a developer and moving on.
That's interesting because I'm thinking of rezoning on buying land and splitting something off versus though it's there. You just said is buying 3 lots beside each other and combining them together to make it more valuable to put something on there.
Yeah, absolutely. Because if you know that you have like a multifamily in kind of that's what you have in mind based on the surrounding development patterns and what's going on in that area, then yeah, you're going to need a certain size of property to be able to accomplish that. And so, yeah, in that scenario, it definitely warranted assembling all of those. And so it took a while to put all those together, but it definitely is worth it in the end.
Yeah, that's cool. How are you guys finding your deals?
That's a good question. There's a lot of ways that people are doing it, and we have a coaching group, and there's a lot of people that are doing their own marketing and everything through that. So they're doing it either through direct mail. Up until recently, at least, they've been doing a lot of text message, ringless voicemail, that kind of thing. I don't do a lot of that myself. I'm very much a big fan of just relationships with agents and brokers and professionals that are allied, like, engineers and architects and things like that. So I'll do a lot of it based off of relationships more than everything, like over time. But if you're just starting out brand new, there's a lot of ways where you can just get like lists of these builders that are local, kind of some, sneaky ways of doing it where you get these lists of these agents and brokers and builders and everything like that. And you can just start calling them and getting an idea of what their buy box looks like. So if you have a property that you're already looking at that might be a potential for a builder, you can call them up and say, hey, I have this property. It's in this general area. What's your buy box look like? What are you guys paying for paper lots on a per lot basis? You can kind of start building those relationships over time like that.
Okay. So you guys have a group. What do you do with your students, right? Are they students
Yeah, absolutely. Yeah. So what they're doing in that group is basically we're out there trying to find these entitlement based opportunities. So it's the rezoning, the subdivisions, and the site plan reviews for multifamily development. It's these kind of projects that we're working on. And so they're out there really doing, a lot of people that we work with come from like the land flipping space. And so they're doing that as their regular course of their business. And so that's kind of their bread and butter. And so now they're looking at doing these kind of projects, doing like, 1, 2, 3 a year as kind of like their home runs, their bigger dollar ones. But their regular business day to day is what's paying the bills and keeping everything moving.
Now, how are people buying these? Because I know like on a property, you can finance it easily. But I know land's a little bit harder. Like a lot of banks don't want to lend on land.
That's correct. Yeah. So a lot of it is through private financing. So private lenders is a big part of it. And then another part of it is there's a lot of joint venture type deals that go on with the seller. So the seller will be in the project all the way through, through to the point where it actually sells to the builder or developer, and then they get paid out. So they're going to get closer to their asking price as a result of that. And they may even share in the upside too. So that's one of the benefits of entitlements too, is because you're not relying on buying the property at a deep discount. You're really more relying on your ability to add value. So it puts you in a position where you can, offer more money at the outset when you're actually going to buy it straight out, or you can get to the point where you get the seller their asking price and then even a little bit more on the profit share when it actually does sell. So it gives you a little bit more flexibility in that sense.
Now, when you're looking at some of these bigger deals, like say, for example, that one you're talking about, combining 3 lots into one, do you have your end buyer already teed up when you're going into that deal?
Great question. We try to. That would be the best, obviously, scenario. But at minimum, what we're doing is as we're going through the due diligence process, we're working on identifying buyers that are in that market. We also really get relationships going with brokers that are selling those types of properties. And we do rely heavily on those relationships as well. So most of the sales and everything are going through brokers. And so a lot of what we're doing is really leveraging their experience and their contacts.
Okay, that makes sense. It's pretty interesting. A whole nother animal. Like it's funny how in real estate, there's all these I call it like a micro niche almost. It's like all these small areas in real estate that you can make like a ton of cash in it.
Yeah, exactly, man. There's so many different ways to do it. I mean, and we're talking about entitlements, but there's so many different ways to structure these things too. I mean, there was another guy that we're working with who had a property that he was just selling it. He didn't do the entitlements himself, but he sold it to a guy who eventually assigned the deal to a mobile home developer. But in the middle, he ended up getting the entitlement. So the guy that I'm working with is the owner. He finds somebody that's going to assign it to a builder. But before he assigns it to the builder, he gets it entitled for the mobile home park. And in the middle, the guy that did that, he got like $500,000, in value out of just doing that assignment because he got that entitlement in place.
Yeah, it's like finding diamonds and polishing them up and cutting them.
Yeah, exactly right. And that's a good way to kind of look at it maybe is that, when you're looking at like flipping land or probably flipping houses and stuff too, or wholesaling, it's a volume game, which makes total sense. In this, it's the exact kind of opposite where it's more hunting for the diamonds, those perfect opportunities in there.
Yeah, that's cool, man. So how can people reach out to you if they want to get involved with this? And who's your ideal person to work with? Like, is it people brand new in the space, or do they have to have a little bit of knowledge and done a couple of deals already?
Yeah, it is a little bit better if they have a couple of deals under their belt. And in terms of like where that comes from, it doesn't matter. There's people that come from like the house flipping and wholesaling place. There's people that come from the land flipping space. So as long as you have some deals under your belt, and we're not, going through some of the basic rudimentary stuff, I think that's good. If you have like marketing channels that you rely on to get deal flow coming through, that's even better. So that way we have kind of make the most of that time because we're able to really sit down and review those opportunities. And so we work a lot with investors, but we also work a lot with agents and brokers as well. So anybody that's really looking at trying to find and uncover these hidden value add opportunities from whatever perspective you come from, that's the people that we want to work with. And so if you're an agent and a broker, probably more of our Lot Hackers website, lothackers.com is really where you'd want to go because you can find out a lot about our opportunities that help you do that. If you're looking at really more of a coaching program, our website, Tolosa, Tolosa, propertygroup.com is the place you want to go.
Perfect. Everyone listening, we'll have those links in the show notes too. Hey, Mike, before I let you go, what's your number one book you'd recommend to people?
That's a great question. I had it recently. Somebody asked me that recently too. And, there's this book called The Creature from Jekyll Island. And I don't know if you heard about it, but it's all about like the monetary policy and how monetary policy started in this country. And, the whole notion of how money really works, so it's not necessarily a real estate book by any means, but it was a really huge like eye opener in terms of how money works. And so I would highly suggest to anybody. It's a long read, so maybe get it on Audible or something like that. But it's really, really interesting.
Yeah, cool, man. Hey, we appreciate you coming on. Thanks, man.
Thank you, man. Thanks for the opportunity.
All right. Hey, everyone. Thanks for listening. Until next time, get out there, crush it, close some deals. We'll see you guys.